What does Islam say about homosexuality? The fitrah is still the fitrah, no matter how distorted it's become. Human beings have an aversion to that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I started to teach in schools and I realized actually things are much worse than I imagined. Things are much worse than I imagined. They teach prematurely adult topics to children. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Wassalatu Wassalam Ala Sayyidina Muhammad bin Abdullah Khatamul Anbiya wal Mursaleen Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So my name is Yusuf Patel and I have been speaking about some of these issues and supporting parents in school around some of the issues of the way sex education is taught in schools, the way LGBTQ identities are imposed upon children since 2008. Okay, so RSE stands for, does anybody know here what RSE stands for? Yes. Yes, excellent. Yes, so it's called, I was in a masjid and they introduced me and said, this brother speaks about religion and sex education. And I was like, no, he's not. Alhamdulillah. So good, you got that right. So it's relationships and sex education. So relationships and sex education is actually a subject that was made statutory in schools. It's legally required for all schools to teach it since 2020. The law was passed in 2017, the initial law, and so it was introduced in 2020. So all of your children, whatever school they go to, they'll be taught this subject. So that means if they go to, what most schools are maintained schools, which are run by the council or overseen by the council, they will teach it. If they go to an academy, lots more academies around, they will teach it. If they go to a free school, fewer free schools around, but they'll teach it. And even if your children go to an independent school, so even if it's a school which is not funded by the government in any way, they'll be taught this subject. So in primary schools, they will teach the subject called relationships education, because sex education in primary schools is not statutory, meaning it's not required for schools to teach. And if a primary school does teach sex education to your children, you have the right to withdraw. So you can withdraw your children from any sex education that's taught within a primary school. Relationships education is statutory, you can't withdraw from that. And in this subject, they teach things like different types of families, the names of body parts. They'll talk about gender stereotypes in this particular subject in primary schools. Now, the problem with a lot of RSE, and I think I'm going to talk in general terms, this doesn't mean that every school does this, but lots of schools do it. One is that some of the problems with RSE in schools is they teach prematurely adult topics to children. Now we know that, there's this idea that children are innocent, children need to be, they don't need to know everything early on. But this society is forcing children to become adults much sooner. And nobody really cares about it, or nobody pinpoints that. They say, look, children are exposed to so much technology, pornography, they're exposed to so many different ideas and values around them, so we need to talk to them much earlier. But they don't say, okay, what is the cause of that? The cause of that is a choice that people make, governments make, societies make. Those people who moved away from religion in society and said we need to move towards liberalism, they made that decision. So firstly, it's not like we've got to this situation, none of us have contributed to that, and now we've got to teach children about this subject. It's a decision that society has made, that where we've got to. Now, so we're teaching children adult topics much earlier. So that means that in lots of primary schools, they'll be teaching things like the names of sexual body parts in year 1 or year 2. And this, we say to schools, this is completely inappropriate. And you know what the reason schools give for why they're teaching this in year 1 and year 2 is because they say, look, we need to safeguard children from abuse. And we say, do children need to know the names of body parts to safeguard themselves from abuse? And the answer is no, they don't. There's lots of, schools used to use this resource from the NSPCC, National Society for the Protection of Cruelty to Children. They used to use this resource, it's called the pants rule. And it said to children, look, what's below the pants is private, and nobody should see that or touch it. Now this is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Why But why do you have to start talking about this is what this part is called, this is what this part is called at the age of 5, 6, or 7? It's completely warped, and that's the only way we can actually that's the only judgment we can make about this. So children should know that certain things are private and certain things should not be touched. That's fine, but they don't have to say this is what the name of that is, this is what the name of that is. But they'll be teaching that in year 1 and year 2. They also say things like, children need to know the names of body parts, because if they have a particular illness, a particular pain, then they can describe it to the doctor. But children do not need to know the larynx to know that they've got some sort of hurt here, a pain here. They say, I've got a pain here. That's enough. They point to the area they've got the pain. They don't need to be able to locate it. And in child abuse cases, when children have been abused, they don't need to mention the names of their body parts to be able to testify in court. Usually they're given a teddy bear and said, where were you touched? Oh, here. That's enough. So the reality is, this idea of teaching children body parts is not about safeguarding children from abuse. This argument has been pushed for many years by a liberal lobby who want your children to have an idea that their body is owned by them. They decide what they can do with it, and this is completely different worldview. Yeah, for actually, even most people in the society don't believe that. They don't believe this idea. It's a very liberal lobby group that is pushing this idea. So that's one thing. One thing is they're teaching adult topics very prematurely to children. Also, they're imposing liberal secular norms onto children as though they are universal. Now, what do I mean by that? When a teacher in the classroom says to a child, it's okay to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Now, that is a values position. That is not a universally accepted norm. Muslims, adherent or devout Christians, not all Christians, devout Jews, and people from other religions won't accept that. Don't accept that. They don't accept that. You can't say that it's okay to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. That's a liberal secular position. That's a position that some people take. Now, if a teacher says that to a child, that goes against the law, because teachers are not meant to impose their values upon children. Rather, the law says in a landmark judgment from 2013, it says that when schools teach about values and about relationships, they need to speak about this in a factual way, the facts about things, not and they need to speak about the broad range of values that exist in society. And they need to use language like, some people believe this, some people live their lives like this. And if schools were to say some people live their lives like this, okay, we could potentially accept what they teach. But teachers start to talk about, we all believe this. Isn't it good to be gay? Isn't it good to be gay? Isn't it good to have 2 dads or 2 mums? Now that is pushing a values position. I was dealing with a case this week. The imam contacted me and said, look, my student is in a school and she was asked to wear a lanyard, like a lanyard that holds an ID card. It's a secondary school, actually, it's a primary school actually. She was told to hold hold a lanyard, to have a lanyard around her neck, which was rainbow coloured, and she didn't want to wear it. She said, "This goes against my religion." The teacher in that class humiliated her and said, "How dare you? You are bigger. You are this, and this is a child. This is not an adult. This is a child. And you have a professional responsibility to treat every child with some respect." If an LGBTQ child had said, look, I don't want to do this because I come from a family of 2 mums and 2 dads, the school would have bent over backwards to accommodate his or her needs. But then do you know what the teacher said to that child? I want proof of this. I need a letter from your mosque to say this is right. Now look, so a child isn't believed. A child is guilty until they prove that their position is accepted. And so we're working with that imam to write a complaint letter, send it to the school, and actually get that teacher to be investigated for those actions, and the school to start to change the way it deals with children from a Muslim background. So the point is that schools are pushing liberal secular norms onto children as though they're universal, but they're not universal. Different people have different perspectives, And as long as we accept, different people have different perspectives. You believe what you want to, let us believe what we want to. Don't impose your values on our children. The third thing is that children are being, the promotion and celebration of LGBTQ identities in schools has become to a level that goes beyond what is acceptable. I spoke to somebody, a teacher in a school, and he said, look, years ago, I really believe this was overblown. This was people were trying to blow the issue out of all proportion. I started to teach in schools, and I realized actually things are much worse than I imagined. Things are much worse than I imagined. If children in Pride Month or LGBTQ History Month are being asked or told to wave an LGBTQ flag, if during a uniform day, Muslim children are forced to wear LGBTQ colors, this goes beyond what schools are there for, educating children, not indoctrinating them, not pushing certain values which are not accepted by everybody, and not accepting the fact that schools have to recognize that there are different children. Some children believe in some things, other children believe in other things. In law, Muslim children are protected by the Equality Act, which is, there are 9 protected characteristics, and one of those is religion and belief. So when a child says, look, this goes against my belief, you can't impose positions on a child that go against their very values positions. So those 3 things. One is children are being told to almost accept adult notions that shouldn't really be pushed by schools. One is they're really pushing values positions onto children and accepting that liberal secular norms have been imposed on children. And third, really a real push for LGBTQ values on a child. So I think, in summation, those are the 3 main issues that are problematic about schools. One of the things that I've realized, and I think speaking to parents, speaking to teachers, Muslim teachers in schools and others, the understanding, the literacy about, there's an LGBTQ lobby, and they're pushing for the needs of the LGBTQ community to be met. And we can't say, why are you doing that? That's what their objective is. But who is educating schools about the needs of Muslim children? If you speak to a teacher and say to a teacher, this is what we believe, a lot of teachers say, is that really what you believe? It's like we're aliens from another planet and they've got no idea as to who we are and what we believe and not believe. And so we've got to educate schools to say, look, this is what our red lines are. This is what we believe. We believe that sexual relationships are not permissible in Islam outside of a marriage between a man and a woman. A man and a woman who are married, that's fine. Anything outside of that framework is unacceptable from our perspective. If you say to most people that's our perspective, they'll say, is that right? You might think that's a bit strange, but actually that's the reality. How the understanding about religion in the society is at an all-time low. People going to churches has decreased so much over the years. Most people don't go to churches. In a census now, most people don't adopt or don't identify with any religious tradition in this country. This is the most secular country in Europe. Meaning people don't think religion is an important part of their life. They go as a tradition to midnight mass at Christmas, but apart from that, there is no adherence to a religion. And so their preconceptions about religion, about Christianity, and lots of people's upbringing about Christianity are then imposed upon Muslim children when Muslim children ask for something. I want a prayer space. No. This is a secular country, which is nonsense. I want this, I want that. Or why are you asking for these accommodations? When a Muslim parent comes and asks the question, it's automatically a defensive approach sometimes towards Muslim parents. What we've got to do is educate schools, and we've got to get parents to be used to asking questions to schools about what their children are being taught. And lots of Muslim parents don't do this. They don't. And so when schools make decisions above their head, they ask, why are you doing that? It's because nobody has approached the school. If you are not speaking to a school to say, these issues are important to me, then how does a school understand that it's important to you? They assume it's not, because 0 parents come to me to speak to me about it. they assume parents aren't concerned. So we've got to ask questions to schools. We've got to ask to see the resources that are being used in these classes. And when we ask to see the resources and a school says no, we've got to remind them the government wrote to schools last year twice. Secretary of State of Education wrote to schools twice last year to say, if a parent comes to you to ask to see the resources, you've got to show it to them. So see the resources, ask lots of questions about what you're teaching, when you're teaching it, what resources that you're using. I want to see the resources. When you see the resources and there's some aspects in those resources which you're not happy with, they're too explicit or they expose children to ideas and values when they shouldn't be, you should say to them, this is what I don't believe this is correct. I'm not happy with that. Schools are allowed to make changes to resources because the resources are not statutory. Schools can also, if you're saying to school, I think at year 1 it's inappropriate for my children to be taught about the names of sexual body parts, then they can make a change and say, okay, we teach that in year 4 or year 5. Yeah? We don't have to teach it in year 1. So realizing you can make changes and where you can make changes, and just by raising your voice to educate schools about what our concerns are can make a huge difference. Yeah? So I'd say that we need to change the mentality of Muslim parents to be more assertive in approaching schools and raising questions and also raising concerns about what they're teaching. So I think that's a good question about what age do you start, and I think there is no age, there isn't like at 5 you discuss this, at 6 you discuss it, at 7 you discuss this, because our the way we raise our children isn't dependent upon a curriculum. Schools teach a curriculum that's age defined, that different year groups that teach different things. But we don't ask the question to parents, when do you start discussing about Palestine with a child? When do you start discussing about halal meat with a child? When do we start discussing about salah with a child? Yeah? When do we discuss the issue of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When do we discuss with a child about the need to recognize that we were created by Allah? But rather, generally, we have organic conversations with our children about all of these issues when the need arises. Yeah? And that's the point we need to really raise with us as parents. Sometimes we have to have conversations with our children about issues much earlier than we would like. Yeah? I wouldn't like to discuss it with my child at that age, but because they're exposed to lots of messages in society, lots of sexual messages in society, earlier than I would have liked, we have to discuss it earlier. Some of the key factors we need to recognize is that if your children go to a state school, you have to discuss things earlier. If they have friends who are Muslim or non-Muslim, because I don't think, you can't just say now, if they have Muslim friends, they're okay, because what type of Muslim friends do they have? What type of upbringing do those friends have? Most of the time, if they have any friends in school, they're going to be exposed to much more. If they have access to the internet, if they have access to TVs and they watch programs on TVs, if they read books, the exposure is everywhere. It's from all corners of society. It's from all aspects of society. So many platforms that are shaping your children's attitudes and behaviors. So if your children are exposed to living in a society at any level, we need to get used to discussing these issues with them sooner. I think the best approach we should take with children is to say that we need to create an open door policy where our children feel comfortable asking us about anything. Yeah? We need to remove any barrier that blocks our children's ability to come to us to ask us about issues. We need to remove. So sometimes we have to have a conversation with our child about things and say to them, if you have any questions about these issues, you come to me. Because over time, our children develop an understanding about a list of things they can ask us about and a list of things they'll never ask us about. Now, we don't ever bring those rules to them to say, you can talk to me about this and not that. But they develop an understanding sometimes by the way we respond to when they ask certain questions, or the fact that we don't raise certain issues, or we just brush things under the carpet. So we need to just remove all the barriers for our children to come to us to ask us about anything. And so that makes those discussions much more organic. Yeah? When they come to us to ask us, I heard this word. Yeah? Don't rebuke them for that. Even if it's a swear word or a wrong word, you need to clarify with them that they need to understand this isn't a word that we Muslims use. This isn't part of our understanding of modesty. This isn't part of what Muslims say. Yeah? and what does it mean, and why don't we say these words? But what it is also is that you only need to give enough information for your child to be confident that you are the person they come to ask these questions. Child comes to you and says, my child came to me a few years ago and says, what is gay? I answered that question with a small amount of information. And I said, if you have any other questions, come to me. And he was happy, he was satisfied. I don't have to talk to him about the history of the LGBTQ movement. I don't have to talk to him about everything and anything. Yeah, I just have to give him enough information to help to cure his curiosity, and then say, whenever you have any other questions, come to me, I'm happy to answer them. That's it. So the question is, there is no easy formula to say this should be discussed at whatever age, but we need to have conversations sooner than we would like, and we need to give them enough information to satisfy their curiosity, and then open up the door for them to ask further questions, and also normalize these conversations, so that, because the reality is, if they're not coming to you, who are they going to? Yeah, at least when they're coming to you, you will talk to them within the boundaries of Islam and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worship of Allah and purpose of life and all of these issues. Where if they're going to somewhere else, those things are going to be absent. And so you don't know what values are underpinning the information that other people are telling your children. Yeah.
They haven't taught it before. Surely they should be engaging with parents, and vice versa, parents engaging with the school.
Yeah. I think, like I said before, you're right. In terms of, we shouldn't see this as a zero-sum game. Either you do nothing or you protest, and there's nothing in between. Yeah. Now, protest is a last resort that shows a breakdown in all communication between parents and the school. What we've got to do is we've got to be much more proactive than that. Sometimes I get messages from parents to say, oh, the school's going to teach this tomorrow, what do I do? And I said, look, why didn't you contact me a month ago, or 2 months ago, or 3 months ago? Why the day before? We are a people sometimes that are firefighting all the time. Yeah, we almost like wait until the nth hour, midnight hour, and we start then to take action. We start to be much more proactive than that. Yeah, I think we need to go to schools and start to ask them. Look, one of the requirements of schools is that they have to consult with parents. Yeah, consultation is not just about a tick box exercise where they say this is what we're planning to do, and that's it. Where it's almost information sharing. Consultation is when they get you involved and they ask for your views, and some of those views then are taken into account when making final decisions. Yeah, but consultation has become nothing more than a tick box exercise. We've just done it. Yeah, okay, we can tick that off. We've done it. Now let's move on to the next thing. But actually, there are a whole host of rules, and these are embodied in a document called the guidance. There's a guidance document for England which governs how schools need to implement this. One of those things is that they need to take into account the age and religious background of pupils when they're deciding upon the resources or materials. Now, when you go to a school and say to them, how are you taking into account the religious background of my pupils? They will say to you, they will look upon you with a puzzling look, like, what does that mean? Because they haven't read this guidance document. They haven't really thought about what they're teaching, other than just following what other schools are doing, or what the local authority has told them to do. And so we've got to expect more of schools. One of the things that schools are legally obliged to do is consult parents before the policy, the RSE policy, is first written, and then whenever it's reviewed. Now, this may seem like, why is that important? The RSE policy defines how a school teaches the entire subject, and therefore it should contain information about the resources they're using, what they're teaching in different year groups, what they're teaching under different subjects under sex education or relationship education, what the role of teachers should be when answering questions, and how teachers should not be imposing their personal views on children. They should be talking about what aspects you've got the right to withdraw from. Yeah, they should talk about how consultation happens. But I've done a recent report, and I looked at, including Birmingham, I've looked at schools across the country, 42 different cities, and the policies that govern RSE in all of those cities. I've looked at every part of Birmingham, and I've looked at probably about 20 policies in Birmingham, yeah, and most policies tell you nothing about what they're teaching, yeah, and it contains very sparse information about what they're teaching. We've got to use the review process that a school is undertaking when review a policy, first of all to get parents involved, and then to get schools to include more detail about what they're teaching, and then shape some of the things that they're teaching in schools. Schools get away with things because we allow them to get away with it. That's the reality. That's the bottom line. Yeah, we don't place any expectations on schools, and we don't strategically almost gear our work with schools. We almost firefight. Yeah, the reality is that approaching schools is almost like the art of diplomacy. Yeah, the way you say things matters. How you say things, who you speak to. If you go into a school with expecting a war, you'll get a war. Yeah, and although that may feel good to us to do, it doesn't achieve the overall ends that we're trying to achieve. If you go to a school and ask questions and say, look, I like the school and the way it teaches my child. I'm concerned about some of these issues. Yeah, can I help you to try and find a way of teaching this subject that meets the needs of our pupils and our school community? We have 90% of children coming from a Muslim background, and I know you might struggle with understanding what the needs of the community are. Can I help you with that? Now, if you go to a school with that tone, only the school which has an agenda will reject your views, which is a minority of schools. That may sound idealistic, but actually, why don't we give it a go? Yeah, and most schools will want to try and get it right. Yeah, so I think that's one thing that we need to think about with regards to schools. One of the programs I'm involved in at the moment is called the RSE Champions Program. I'm trying to train up people in different parts of the country so that they become like support and advisors and guides for the parents in their area. Yeah, this is free one-day training. You do that training, you will be upskilled with the knowledge, skills to guide other parents and support other parents. I'm doing a training soon in Birmingham as well to support parents in this area. What we need to do, if we can support parents to understand how to use the tools at their disposal to approach schools, we can achieve some changes in schools. And this is not like a secretive plan to change schools. This is all within the law, within your right as parents to do. And so I think all we need to do is up our game, go from crisis and crisis management and firefighting to a much more proactive approach.
You have a second question? Brothers, I'll come to you in a moment. Would you mind similar approaches to give principles for schools to follow, curriculum for schools to follow?
Yes. So it's a good question. I think so. The point is that you're right in terms of when schools talk about values, they talk about a broad range of values and include religious perspectives as well as non-religious perspectives. And so the problem is, you're right, it's not happening. Yeah, we've done many attempts. The organisation I've got called is SRA Islamic. We're changing our name to Muslim Family Initiative, but we created like guidance documents for schools to understand what our issues are. One thing we want to do, and we're trying to do this, is actually trying to create a document which highlights very clearly what the views of Islam are about these topics, so that schools don't think there's differences. Some groups believe this, they are very clear. In these areas, 99.99% of Muslims believe the same. Yeah, no matter what group you are, what background you are, this is one of those issues where there's vast agreement and consensus on all of these issues, around the issue of marriage, around the prohibition of same-sex sexual relationships, the prohibition of zina. All of these things are very clear. There's no differences at all within these issues. So what we're going to do is almost write a statement which just very clear, summarizes all our values, yeah, and get imams and scholars to sign it, and then use that with schools to say, these are our positions on these issues. We want to also create some sort of resource or documents for schools to understand, to take that and actually then say, these are our positions on these issues. So there is some things that we can do on this. We're hoping that with this RSE we've already trained up 200 champions across the country. This RSE Champions movement will be almost the group of people who will engage with schools and support parents in advocating on behalf of Muslim parents and our positions on these issues, inshallah.
Relationships with
Yes.
people.
So I think the issue, this whole pronoun issue, has become a very big hot potato in different areas, in schools, in workplaces, in all sorts of different environments. Now, I think that, you know, I don't believe, I know people differ, I don't think this is a big issue if you're being asked to say what you say, okay, I say him, he and him, or her and she, whatever, you say this is these are the pronouns I use. And if somebody wants to be addressed by another pronoun, address them by a pronoun. You're not necessarily going to win the battle in the workplace, because people are not basing their idea of this whole political ideology, this whole sexual ideology, not building it upon something intellectual. It's not intellectual. You know, there isn't any intellectual basis. There's no reality to any of this. Really, it's about what people feel about themselves. And feelings don't have any reality other than the way your perception of your own reality. You know, this idea of truth, existence of absolute truth, no longer exists as a society. People say, this is my truth, this is your truth. Now, unless we want to engage with the workplace on the whole, what we call ontology, or the truthfulness of these paradigms, or we want to talk about epistemology, where do we understand what knowledge is true or false? You know, the reality is that you can't convince people about this, the correctness of an idea, unless you can convince them about how do we understand what truth is? Who defines what good and bad is? Who defines what truth is? Most people in this society believe human beings define what good and bad is. We believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger defines that for us. We have a completely different worldview to most people in the society. We're not going to convince them about the branches unless they understand the root problem around how lost people are in the society, how people are lost in terms of understanding who created them and for what purpose. This is much more existential discussion that needs to be had with people. So I say in the workplace, if you have to use these things, if you're told to like have an LGBT flag and wave it, that's a different matter. I would say, no, you speak to the workplace and say, look, from my perspective, I'm a Muslim, I believe in these values. I don't believe in these values being acceptable for a Muslim to either agree to or to propagate. And you very clearly say, look, I will treat anybody in the workplace, however they identify, whoever they want to be, I will treat them with respect, because I treat people as human beings, not as labels. Yeah, I don't care about the label that anybody carries. I'll treat people like in my workplaces. It so happened in my last workplace, my last two managers identified as gay. And I worked with them and I spoke to them about these issues. And I say, I as a Muslim have fundamental differences around these issues. And they respected that and said, okay, that's fine. Yeah, you could, as long as on the workplace, people treat each other well, yeah, and with some politeness, they don't mistreat people. And if my manager says do this, then I'll do it. He says, okay, contact this organization, I contact that organization. As long as that the work is being done, most people are happy with that. Yeah. At some point, when things are going to the extent where people are being forced, Muslims are being forced to accept certain positions which are contrary to Islam, we've got to push back against that and educate employers and workplaces around that. So what was the second question? Sorry.
It was kind of interrelated. The first one was
Yeah, the one thing I want to do, the question I want to ask you, because this is something that really is important. Yeah, this is the question I want to ask you, and I want to ask although you're putting a question to me, I want to ask you this question. What does Islam say about homosexuality? Okay, so someone says haram. Okay, what else? Anything else?
Only if it's acting on it.
Acting on it, okay.
And it's only between two males as well.
Okay, two males acting upon it. Physical act, okay.
And
If
you haven't thought about it, as long as you don't announce it, you're not sinful.
Okay, all right. Anybody else want to contribute to this answer?
Refer to Qawmi Lut.
Okay, Qawmi Lut. Okay, so Qawmi Lut. The answer is Islam has nothing to say about homosexuality. Now, don't lynch me, yeah. But the reality is, we understand homosexuality as a behavior, yeah. The definition of homosexuality is about an identity, and it's about who you are. They believe, it comes from a liberal notion of human beings, yeah, that goes against the reality and Islam. They believe that human beings are endowed, inside every human being, there's something called sexuality. Yeah, that means that you're either heterosexual, homosexual. That's it. These are within the homosexual, gay, lesbian, all these identities, and then gender identities are included within that as well. They have this notion that inside somebody you have something called sexuality or sexual orientation, and people are not. They're not behaviors. They're who you are. If somebody anybody know Philip Schofield? Yeah? I remember we grew up when we were younger watching breakfast TV with this person called Philip Schofield. He used to be the presenter. He was a famous presenter. He came out on national TV, and I don't know, maybe he must have been about in his 50s or in his early 60s, and he said, I'm gay. Yeah. And people didn't say, oh, before that you were heterosexual and now you are homosexual. They said it's something that he hid for all those years, and he suddenly was brave enough to come out and he was celebrated by everybody. So it's almost something internally hidden within somebody that comes out at some point that you are something that you're born with. Yeah, you're born as heterosexual or homosexual or somewhere in between those two. Now we say there's no such thing as sexuality, sexual orientation. These are constructs. These are labels that people use to describe an attraction. They're not real. They don't exist in reality. Yeah? They don't exist in any. They're just labels that people use. When we talk about behaviors, they talk about identities. And identity can't change. A young Muslim boy who has attraction to another Muslim boy or a non-Muslim boy or whoever, another boy, they say, oh, you are gay. Now you have to live that life. It's not about behavior, it's about identity. This is the badge you're going to wear, and this badge entails a whole host of flags, language, interactions, lifestyles. Now, of course, Islam prohibits the action of Qawmi Lut, but Qawmi Lut were not LGBTQ because this is a 19th century phenomenon. This identity is a 19th century phenomenon. The idea that this is more than a behavior, this is an identity, it comes from the 19th century. It's not, doesn't come from, most people in society believe that attraction is about a desire that you can either act upon or not. It can lead to a behavior or not. It doesn't force you or compel you to act in a particular way. Just like somebody wants to steal. Now, if he decides to steal, he can't say this is an internal characteristic that forced me to steal. No, he's accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the society for stealing. He made a choice based upon the want to act upon a desire. Now, similarly, all sexual desires are desires. They're from shaitan. They're either good or bad. You act upon it or not. Nobody compels you to act one way or another. And behaviors can be chosen or not chosen. You can decide to act or not to act. You know, the reality is that identities have no, if you say, define an identity, nobody can define it. Yeah, because it's part of a political, ideological perspective about human beings. It's not a real thing. Yeah. So all of these labels come from the 1860s. Yeah, they came from a man called Karl Maria Karp-Benny. Yeah, he came up with this term homosexual and heterosexual. So we shouldn't use the terms. We shouldn't say I'm heterosexual. No, we say I am married to a woman, and that's it. This is a norm in every society, in every civilization, from the time of Adam alayhi salam till now. It's only until the 1860s they decided to label these terms, yeah, homosexual and heterosexual. These terms don't have any reality to us. Yeah? We believe that all feelings, when they come to us, feelings are by nature temporary. Desires are temporary. Yeah? We either give in to our desires or we reject them. The essence of Islam is that we fight our desires. The essence of liberalism is you give in to your desires. There's no need to fight your desires. We live in a society which says, maximize your sensual pleasure. Maximize your pleasure. That's your objective in life. We have a different worldview. Our objective is to suppress our desires when they come to us, and those desires are displeasing to Allah. We suppress them and we fulfill our purpose. So look, fundamentally, in order to safeguard our children from zina and from this LGBT indoctrination, we've got to build in our children a strong understanding of their purpose. So that when they look at desires, they can understand, I am suppressing this desire, not because my parents are Muslim and that's it. Because most Muslim children, when are asked, Why are you Muslim? They say, because my parents are Muslim. They're suppressing those desires because this is what I was created for. This is my very purpose in life. If I act upon my desire, I am completely going against the real reason why I was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Setting that purpose for this is my meaning in life, this is my purpose in life is so important. Muslim children have to have an understanding that Allah with certainty created me. He created me for a purpose. When they pick up the Quran, they need to, how many of our children pick up the Quran and think, this is guidance from the heavens. Oh, it's just as a book I read. Yeah, I read these words and I go home and that's it. This guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate formula for success for anybody who recognizes their purpose in life. It was sent through by the creator of everything through the angel Jibreel alayhi salam to the last and final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam to guide all humanity. Yeah? It is written by, it's the revelation by a creator who knows what's best for human beings. Yeah? If you ask a person, if you ask anybody to come into a room and say, what is best for human beings? There'll be 20, 30 different answers, even though there are only 10 people in the room. Human beings are ill-equipped to understand what is good for them, because they are affected by bias, whatever their own self-interest, whatever satisfies me. If you were to say, for example, look, all of you, tell me is this good or bad? If it's good for me in this life, I'll say, yeah, it's good. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hadn't prohibited khamr, alcohol, intoxicants, yeah, and we drunk, imagine how much we would be, we'd go home, we'd beat our wives, we'd do all sorts of nonsense. Yeah? Allah saved us from that because He knows what's best for us. Alcohol, yeah, you may have some happiness by drinking alcohol, but the evil in it is so great that human beings should not indulge in drinking any amount of alcohol. We also have to, so there's one thing, we have to build a foundation of strength in our children so they understand, why am I Muslim? This is at the heart of it. If we say, same-sex relationships are haram, how do they understand what haram is? They need to understand that haram is connected to the creator who created me for a purpose and defined for me how best I should live my life. The second thing we need to establish in our children to create almost some safeguarding in our children, first is foundational strength, why am I Muslim, being a clear answer. Secondly, we need to build, as fathers especially, this is for fathers especially, build in our children an understanding of that they are loved. That may seem confusing. Of course my children feel that they're loved. But children understand love in visible, direct ways. Yeah? If we have never said to our children, I love you, yeah, as fathers, we need to. If we've never hugged our children, we need to hug our children. We've never kissed our children, we need to kiss our children. If we've never spent quality time with our children, we need to spend quality time with our children. All of these build love and relationship with our children. There's research in America from this. There's a psychologist called. He's died now, but his name was Nicolosi. Yeah, Joseph Nicolosi Senior. He's died. His son's now Joseph Nicolosi Junior. But he studied this issue and he said, look, I worked with lots of men who had same-sex attraction. They thought they were gay, but they had same-sex attraction. He said the common factor in all of them was they had fathers who were overly strict, too strict, and were not nurturing enough, did not show love to their children. That developed within them some abnormalities, which when they grew up, they started to crave attention from other male figures, other masculine figures in their life. They didn't get their fatherly love, so they're trying to seek fatherly love from that relationship. And that led to abnormalities. I've worked with lots of families, yeah? not as in worked as in a professional capacity, but I've advised and supported families. I'll give you two examples and then I'll take some more questions. This is really important. A mother, for example, first of all, I'll start with this. A brother contacted me, but he's about 19 years old. Yeah, he said, "Look, ever since I was young, ever since I've known, I've had attractions to males." Yeah, we spoke about his childhood and everything, all of it. Not talking about this feeling. This feeling is not the problem. The problem is some sort of abnormality that underpins all of that. So we talked about lots of these issues. And it came down to, look, he said, as I was growing up, I'm the only boy in a household full of girls. I was the first boy. And you'd expect that boy to be spoiled, isn't it? Yeah? If you have all girls and you have a boy, you spoil the boy. If you have all boys and you have a girl, you spoil the girl. But he said, my mother mistreated me. She was the one who really ran the household. My father was quite passive. She would mistreat me. She would swear at me. She would abuse me. Like, she would be very verbally abusive towards me. Yeah? She didn't show me love. So we realized that he built a hatred towards women as he grew up. So he hated women. Yeah, he goes, there was a moment in a couple of years ago, when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. She started, for the first time ever, to treat me with love. She used to say, Beta, I love you. You know, she used to say things to him, and she goes, automatically, it was almost instantaneous. Almost somebody had pressed a switch. Yeah, I went out for the first time in my life. I felt attraction to women. Yeah, and so because of the connection between his relationship with his mother and his hatred towards women, so he then started to feel attraction towards women for the first time. But he goes, it was a short-lived thing, because my mother, they realized it was not terminal cancer. She went back to her old ways, and that attraction towards women disappeared, and my hatred towards women carried on. And this person needs counseling to look into this, to deeply delve into this. He needs masculine figures around him, yeah, who show love to him, but in a non-sexual way. Yeah? Brothers who hug him and treat him like a brother, and are father figures to him or mentors for him. That's what he needs. One more example I'll give you is, there was a girl, yeah, a mother called me and said, look, my daughter, we're a Muslim family, very strong, practicing Muslim family. But my daughter, she identifies, she wants to be a boy. And this is really breaking up our family. We don't know what to do. I said, look, this is not the issue. Yeah, this is almost a cry for help. Try and locate what the actual problem is. So she had conversations with her daughter over a long time, and she located the problem. You know, her daughter then broke down and said, look, I don't really want to be a boy. The problem is, I live in a household. I have all older brothers. Whenever my brother finishes his meal, he leaves his plate on the table. I've got to pick it up, take it to the sink, wash it. When they finish with their clothes, they throw them on the floor. I've got to pick them up, do the washing. I've got to do all these things. So I felt in my mind that if I became a boy, I wouldn't have to do these things. And it's obviously that's very illogical, but logical at the same time. And when they made changes in the household to change that, then she said, yeah, absolutely, I don't want to be a boy. You know, the reality is that all of these things, the issue of I identify as gay, there is a deeper rooted problem. There's either abuse, there's either detachment from a mother or a father, mainly a father. There is a sense of being different. There's being affected by the prevailing environment which pushes and celebrates LGBTQ identities. So if a child thinks they're different, and then they're told, oh, you're different because of you're gay, then they adopt that difference and they put a label to that difference, and they live that life in that box. So all of these things, all of these issues around identifying as LGBT, all of these things are not the issue. They're almost cries for help. Underpinning that are problems that need to be resolved. There are two ways. Yeah, one way is to identify what our purpose in life is, yeah, and then who defines what is good and bad. But the second way is, the reality is, yeah, human beings have lived a particular way of life. You know, if there's a particular behavior that exists in one part of the world and not the other part of the world, you can say, oh, that's a particular behavior restricted to that country or that people. But you know, the issue of marriage between a man and a woman, yeah, that's a universally acknowledged institution. Every society across every part of the world, even amongst if there's an isolated tribe who's never even met anybody from outside of their area, yeah, they adopt an idea that a man and a woman, yeah, they marry, and that marriage may differ in the rules, but they commit to each other and they have children and they raise their children as a family. This is a universally acknowledged norm. Yeah? The reality is that you don't have to read anything to know that. It's deeply ingrained in the fitrah. But the reality is, in our society, the fitrah has completely been lost. It's been dismembered, disfigured. People's connection to their fitrah has been overtaken in such a way. But that doesn't stop people from finding their fitrah. Yeah, finding the fact that there's a creator. You know, the people who are lost in the society, who feel as though society hasn't really met their needs in terms of their purpose, they come to Islam. Yeah, they don't go to New Age religions because they don't give you any, or they don't go to Christianity. Christianity doesn't believe in anything anymore. They come to Islam. Yeah, the issue is, you know, even from a biological perspective, yeah, you know, nowadays you can't say this, but years ago, yeah, there's a role in America called Surgeon General in America. Surgeon General in America, he's like the highest medical authority in America, and what he says has authority. He said, yeah, the backside of a person is an exit point, not an entrance point. Yeah, and there was a controversy. How dare you say that? Medically, that's the reality. Medically, that part of the body has been created to remove all the toxic elements from the body through excretion. Yeah, that's not meant to be an entry point. Yeah, but so this idea of that sexual relationship is abnormal. It's not. The people who engage in this have so many illnesses, diseases, so many problems because this is not the norm. Yeah, this is not how people have been created to be. Yeah. Now the issue is, if somebody believes in an ideology has overtaken reality, overtaken facts today. Yeah.
What I
So
was trying to say is they're trying to normalize it, but there are scientific aspects where you can prove.
yeah, absolutely. You know, the problem is you go to anybody, any people, and you say to them, you know, if you describe to most people the reality of the LGBT sexual relationships, yeah, automatically they will like feel nausea, yeah, they'll feel like, because you know the whole LGBT, all of this phenomenon has been spoken about in terms of love is love. And when you say love is love, it seems very innocuous. Why would you be against love? If you're against love, you're the villain, yeah. But if you talk about it from the perspective of this is what people do, yeah, most people when they first hear it, they, oh, what? That relationship is built upon that aspect of the sexual relationship. Yeah, they can't imagine that. Some of the Sahaba would say that, you know, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about this behavior in the Quran, I couldn't imagine that a man would do this. I would never imagine that because it's so far removed from the fitrah of human beings. I could never imagine that. Yeah. So I think, you know, the reality is we're talking about all of this and people say, can we speak about this? The reality is we're speaking about this from a moral perspective, from the perspective of our values. Remember, we're not speaking about you go to people who identify as gay and harm them or hurt them or attack them. This is not our goal. Our goal is to uncover the idea and how incorrectly founded this idea is. Because it is an idea, and every idea should be critically analysed and subjected to scrutiny. If we live in a society where we can do that, why shouldn't we? We're not saying if a man wants to marry a man, we're not going to stop him. Yeah, we're not going to stop him. We've got no authority to stop that person from doing that. They're allowed in law to do that. But we can critique this idea that this is a lifestyle that is normal. It isn't normal. The number of people who identify as LGBT is such a small, minuscule amount of people. If you look, for example, to any American program on TV, yeah, there'll be 1, 2, or 3 characters who identify as LGBTQ. A man marries a man, a woman marries a woman. And you think that there are lots of people who identify that. Even in America, the percentage is very, very small. Yeah, about 3, 4, 5%. Very small in comparison to the numbers that we think they are, because of the way the normalization process has taken hold upon people and the overrepresentation in popular entertainment. It suggests that there's a higher number than actually are. You know, I think most people in the society, if you speak to them about actually what it means to be engaged in this relationship, they would not think it's a good thing. They will not think this is a normal way. Oh, this is a really good. This is a loving way that people. No, they would think this is disgusting, because the fitrah is still the fitrah, no matter how distorted it's become. human beings have an aversion to that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? Have an aversion to idolatry, have an aversion to abnormality. This is not part of the norm in society. People have become accustomed to accepting it, but that's not how people have been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's two very good questions. I think you're right in terms of, I would say if a patient says, look, I want to be called she, yeah, you can call them by their name. If they say they're definitely a man and they want to be called Brenda, call them Brenda. It's not the end of the world, yeah. Call them whatever they want to be called. You can still feel that this is not right. A man wants to be a woman wants to be a man. You can still dislike that and not consent to it, not agree to it, or whatever. Yeah, you can call people whatever they want to be called. That's not a big issue. But the second one, and I think this issue is overblown. The number of people who are born, and it's from birth. It doesn't change like when someone's 10, suddenly they have a change. No, from birth. If there's an abnormality in birth, the number of people who have an abnormality in birth is about 0.001% of people. It's such a small percentage of people. It's not a significant percentage of people in any sense. Yeah, like for example, there could be certain situations where a child is born with indeterminate sexual parts. Yeah, and then there can be sexual procedures done to correct that. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah, because that's something that's not within the control of the person. But these are such a small minority case. In Pakistan, all those people who consider themselves hijrah, they're not all from that situation. Some of them dress like women in order to make money, to dance, to make a career. Yeah. So people lump all of these people as hijrah, and they said these are all people. They call them intersex. They're not. Yeah. The percentage in the world of people who are born with indeterminate gender. Yeah, who in the Quran, in the Hadith, they talk about mukannaf for all these different categories of people. These are small minorities. These are exceptional cases. So I think sometimes, and so most of these cases are people who just want to change from one to another, like in Iran, for example. And it's this is completely at odds with Islam. There's from the Shia, they say that a man, if we want to be a woman, then it can be a woman, and a woman can be a man. They can change. This is not from Islam. This is a complete contradiction to the basis of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created somebody, and to change as a man and a woman, yeah, with reality, and to change from man to woman is to change change the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is absolutely forbidden. Yeah. So I'd say really we need to put all into context. This idea of intersex is a small minority, but they include intersex within LGBTQI. They shouldn't be as part of that, because these people have an abnormality which they have got no control over. They were born with something, and they're a small minority. They shouldn't be included with people who want to change because their feeling comes to them that I believe that I'm a boy, or I believe I'm a girl. So I think that it's really important to stress that it's not the same thing.